Most businesses only focus on growing and expanding, and they give little to no attention to their exit strategies until after exit is staring them in the face. Learn here at Boosting Business Value, brought to you by Blue Sky Business Resources. You'll discover how to shape a more durable and saleable business, and how to implement a powerful, well-planned, and rewarding exit. Join Dr. David Gruder and Jason Tuzinkewich as they deliver actionable tips for lower middle market company owners, executives, and their trusted advisors. Find out where your business currently stands, how you can meet your revenue objectives more reliably, and how to grow your venture to the next level, all with a smooth and fruitful exit in mind. Here are your hosts, Dr. David and Jason.
Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to look at some familiar questions from an unfamiliar angle. We're going to take the perspective of team members who are facing an M&A transaction instead of that of the owner who's selling. And the big questions we're going to address are, how do you manage M&A anxiety? What questions do you as a team member need to ask? And how do you discover those answers and take action? So for those of you who are new to the Boosting Business Value podcast, my name is Jason Tuzinkewich. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Blue Sky Business Resources. And with me, as always, is my friend and co-host and partner in crime, Dr. David Gruder, Blue Sky's Business Lifecycle Exit Planning and Post-Acquisition Psychologist. Welcome, David. Good to see you again.
No, thank you, Jason. Great, as always, to be with you. Let's get this baby rolling. Let's start off with the big question of what the devil is team M&A anxiety in the first place. And there are basic questions that are going to fuel what we're going to deep dive into in this episode. But those two basic questions related to M&A anxiety on the part of team members are, first of all, do I want to stay after the sale? And if so, will I be able to stay? Or do I want to leave after the sale? And those are the big basic questions that each team member is going to need to answer for themselves. And so we're going to be discussing how to go about answering those questions. But why don't you go deeper, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. And those questions seem so simple on the surface, but the implications are huge, right? It's not just an implication for your own personal life as you make those decisions, but it impacts your family. It impacts the business that is undergoing a transaction, your teammates and friends. So, let's take this really seriously, because the weight of those implications can definitely add additional anxiety and stress to the complexity of an already unnerving situation. And some of those underlying questions that provoke and create the anxiety around making these decisions are questions like, what will this sale look like for the company, for me as an individual, for my team? And do I want to be a part of that change? Can I be a part of that change? Do I have any control over my destiny other than exerting control by leaving? And what will it mean for me and my life and my family and all those other stakeholders in my life once I've committed to a path? And that whole piece of control just keeps coming back up in all of these questions. It's like, what is the impact? And two, how much power do I have over the impact? Whether I make a decision or not, will a decision be made for me? And if I do make a decision, can I live up to that decision? And then finally, once I've made a decision, how do I communicate that to the people around me in a productive and not destructive way to make sure that I can help facilitate mutual success in the decision that I've made? So with all of that said, let's dive right into the big challenges. And as we see it, we can break it down to four really key big challenges that need to be taken into account when you're trying to overcome this anxiety. And we know that anxiety and stress foster bad decision making. So let's create this framework of understanding, recognizing, and naming challenges so that we're better equipped to tamp down those emotional barriers to good decision making and open up the floodgates to productivity and success. And, the number one thing, and this is going to be the big skeleton in the darkest closet, is that innate fear of the unknown. The less we know, the more our imagination will create terror. And so that's going to be the first and the biggest and the darkest challenge to face and name, is recognizing that I don't know a whole lot. And that is causing the worst case scenario to become prominent in my brain.
That is a huge anxiety piece. And paired up with that anxiety piece, as if that wasn't enough by itself, is a kind of internal disdain for change. There's an old cliche: it may be hell, but it's home. And what I often refer to it as is status quo addiction. Whatever we've gotten used to is what we then are often inclined to keep supporting, even after it's outlived its usefulness. And this is a kind of misapplication of a really important part of being human, which is our incredible capacity to adapt. And the golden side of adaptation is that when we adapt in useful ways, we become more productive, more involved, more passionate, more purpose-driven, things along those lines. The shadow side of our tendency toward adaptation as human beings is that if we don't watch ourselves, we'll adapt to the unacceptable. And then we'll support having adapted to it. So when there's this disdain for change, which is really about not trusting our ability to keep growing and keep transforming in the face of the unexpected or unanticipated or even undesired, this is a really big fear that a lot of people have, that causes paralysis, and either paralysis that people get stuck in, or paralysis that people rebel against by becoming impulsive in their decision making.
I love that you showed both sides of that coin, Doctor. That's great. And I think we can all relate, both personally and within our sphere of friends, to people that have gotten stuck in an environment that isn't conducive to joy. And from an outsider, it's so easy to see the 2 steps to the left that it would take to get out of it. But for the insider, that inertia is so strong that that you stay stuck. And I know I've been there at times in my life as well. So I appreciate you bringing that up and showing both sides of the impact. And the other thing is,
I know that firsthand, of course. Both sides of that.
Yeah, I love it. And, in all of this fear of the unknown and this disdain for change, one of the problems that really kind of amps up this anxiety is the fact that you're not going to achieve full transparency. You're not going to be able to have all of your questions answered about what the future will look like post-closing. It's just not plausible. There are confidentiality issues, as well as there's just a time constraint, and nobody knows the true nature of what the future is going to bring. So how do you bridge all of those anxiety-inducing compounding elements to get yourself as much information as possible, gain clarity, if not transparency, and be able to be well-informed to tamp down some of these things? And I think that is a tricky situation to be in, balancing between how much information is reasonable to expect that I can use to gain comfort and some sort of sight forward, and how do I deal with the elements that I cannot expect to know fully.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And then compounding things even further is the fourth of the big challenges.
There's more?
Oh, if you're not anxious enough, just wait. We'll really make you anxious. The fourth of the big challenges that we want to touch on that have to be addressed in order to reduce team member M&A anxiety is about autonomy and control. And so the autonomy piece is that part of our wiring as human beings has to do with our free will. And free will translates into personal freedom. That's about autonomy. You know, how do I be the sovereign of my own life? And where that really comes into play is when we feel like we're out of control with choices that are being made that are going to impact us, such as a choice to sell a company that we work for. If we're not the owner of the company, we probably have very little control over whether or when the company we work for is going to be sold. And so when we have our drive for autonomy and we don't have control over certain decisions that are going to impact our self-sovereignty, that brings up a huge amount of anxiety. And there's a term for that form of anxiety, and it's called authority shadow, meaning that when we have uncomfortable or ineffective relationships with people who are in leadership positions or decision-making positions, we will channel that discomfort either by shutting down and becoming yes people and just simply pretending to be compliant when we're really not, or by attacking people who are the decision makers, throwing arrows at them simply because they're decision makers, or by trying to do sidesteps around the system, kind of passive aggressively. All of those are different manifestations of authority shadow. But authority shadow exists because, in most of us, because people in our past were in control of certain decisions that impacted us and impacted us in ways that felt harmful or tyrannical or inhibited our autonomy or our freedom. And so all of us, if we have authority shadow issues, if we have discomfort or rebellious or submissive attitudes toward authorities, toward people who make decisions, we come by those honestly. But that doesn't mean that we're justified in staying stuck in authority shadow. It's about stepping out of that and reclaiming our autonomy and our self-sovereignty in relationship to decisions that we aren't always in control of, but we're always in control of the choices we make in response to those decisions that have been made.
You just said a mouthful, my friend. And I love that every session that we have on this podcast, my vocabulary grows. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
So tell me, is there hope?
No hope. So we can just end the episode right here. Come back. Yes, of course, there's hope. There's a success roadmap for dealing with all of this. And it's got a couple of components. We're going to unpack them one at a time. And the first component of the success roadmap for dealing with M&A anxiety is the autonomy piece. It has to do with us getting clear, us utilizing a potential sale of a business that we work for as a really important opportunity for us to reassess what our career dreams are, what our purpose is in being part of the workforce, and to recognize that we have far more power than we think in terms of if we make a decision to stay, because a good workforce is really hard to come by. And any sophisticated buyer of a business knows that. So if we decide that staying is in line with whatever our career dreams are that we get to revisit and either reaffirm or modify because an M&A might be in the offing. If we decide we want to stay even after the company is sold, we can make ourselves indispensable. And if we do that because we want to stay, it's really likely that we'll be retained if that's what we want to be, because a good workforce is so hard to come by.
Beautifully stated. And, to give you a little reciprocity on the vocabulary learning, I have a term for this. I like to call it the kick in the pants benefit. And what happens is people always want control, right? But as you described earlier, this desire for control sometimes bleeds itself off in negative ways because you haven't taken the time to determine what you really want. You're just reacting. And so this change gives you that kick in the trousers to think about, before I behave badly, before I react to the situation, let's assess. Let's figure out, what do I really want? And that thinking about what you really want gives you control back. It gives you power, and it gives you the ability then to exert your autonomy in a productive fashion. So I love that taking that assessment is your first step to success in dealing with this anxiety. And,
And I love that you're calling this something that I've not heard phrased this way before, a kick in the pants benefit.
Well, there you go. You'll find it in a lot of psychological books from here on out.
Uh-huh. So we have a psychological disorder now called the kick in the pants benefit disorder, where people are afraid to rise to the kick in the pants.
Exactly. It's a type of phobia.
Kick in the pants phobia. There we go.
There you go. I love it. So, once you've decided all of these things, and once you've started to get yourself on a little bit of firm footing because you have this control of knowing what destiny you desire, then you can start shaping it. And the best, most productive way to start shaping it within the confines of, considering an M&A transaction and dealing with anxiety is developing and cultivating open and honest communication. And this is going to have to be driven by the team members, because the team members are the village mushrooms, right? They're in the dark and they're fed a lot of, and so they're going to be the ones that are reacting to fear the most. And so if you as a team member step up and you say, let's start asking some good questions. Let's start figuring out the bounds of what we can know. And let's ask those questions so that we can have, a little bit of clarity and start to gain that vision that we were talking about. But the other side of that is everybody around you, everybody in the team is dealing with the same anxiety. So there will be a lot of fear-based speculation. And, we all know that the unknown is where all the monsters live, right? If we don't know what's happening, then we assume the worst. It's natural instinctive behavior. We could chalk it off to, our hunter-gatherer days. But recognizing that, and again, recognizing these challenges, giving them a name and turning the light on so you can face them head on makes them a lot less scary. And so again, if you're thinking about whether or not I want to leave, I want to be indispensable. If I choose to leave, I want to be missed. If I choose to stay, I want to have control over staying. Being a leader in clear, honest, and direct communication, and being the leader that stifles that fear-based pontification amongst the team is the most power that you could ever exert to help your team members, to help your business owner, who probably is a boss that you care for, and to help the success of the organization around you, no matter which destiny you choose.
Mm-hmm. So well said. And isn't it a sacred blessing that we get to actually help people with these kinds of questions and to discover their own answers to these kinds of questions?
So true. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago, and I was talking about dealing with this exact scenario. And the private equity firm representative that I was talking to, he's like, "So what? You have a psychologist on your team?" Like, as a matter of fact, we do.
My goodness, what a concept. So the third element in our success roadmap has to do with it's an outgrowth or an outcome that emerges from asking good questions. And that is, once you've got more of a picture of what's in store, then you can really determine whether there is a match or a mismatch, or how much of a match or mismatch there is between your dreams and the sale of the business. And so, as you were so beautifully saying, Jason, it's so important for everyone, regardless of whether they're staying or leaving, or whether they know if they're staying or leaving, to get involved in the transition and sale preparation process, so that you really get to know, through getting involved with that and asking the right questions, you get to know how much of a match there is between your career dreams, the kick in the pants benefit that you've gotten because this sale is coming up, and the way that the merger or the acquisition is going to happen. And once you've been involved in that preparation process, then if you think, I'm not sure if I want to stay or go, even with the information that I have, that also is an opportunity for you to do something that I have found is far too rarely done by people, which is to envision what your best dreams, career dreams and M&A match would be based on the information that you've acquired. It's when I ask people that I mentor, what would your ideal job be if such and such happened? What would your ideal role be? What if this sale goes through? What is the role that you would most love to fill? Daring to ask yourself that question internally is a great way of discovering not only whether you want to stay or whether you want to leave, but more importantly, if you do stay, is there an opportunity for you to recraft your role so that it's going to be even more what you want it to be in the post-merger or acquisition process?
Yeah, I love that. And, this goes back to that kind of control piece, right? Most sophisticated buyers of businesses are looking for personnel. And if they see an individual who is engaged in the process, who is engaged in success, who is communicating effectively, and then comes to them and says, I have this vision for how I could deliver value to the new company, whether that's a larger whole or whether that's the same company with new growth expectations, the buyer is going to listen. The buyer may not always say, yes, we can do that, but the buyer will listen and they'll be interested and you'll be valuable in their mind because you're already pegged as a proactive solutions individual.
Right. They'll listen, they'll be interested, and they'll be impressed.
Absolutely. And, a lot of people, you mentioned, which I love, that people don't do this. And for those of you who have been listening to our podcast and have heard a couple episodes, you're going to start to see kind of this pattern in how we address and deal with success roadmaps. But we also feedback on information we talked about before. This learned helplessness that we talk about a lot is the driver of the inertia we mentioned before, the fear of change, as well as the driver for not believing enough in the value and the reality of envisioning your best future professionally and then going out and making it happen. And so I love that you bring that up. And I love that, it feeds off of what we talk about a lot.
And I'm really glad that you tied this in explicitly with the learned helplessness issue.
It's important. And I think that the more we shine a light on these negative things, the more people can, myself included, recognize it and say, hey, wait, I know what that is. Dr. G gave me a name for that. Now let's address it and move forward, right?
As a colleague of mine and friend of mine, David Corbin, says in one of his best-selling books, illuminate the negative, accentuate the positive, instead of eliminate the negative, which is a form of denial. Mm-hmm. Illuminate the negative, and so that you can then accentuate the positive.
Absolutely. You got it. You got to face it or it will just chase you.
Yep.
I love that. And then, closing the loop on this success roadmap, as we like to do, we like to put a pretty bow on it and make sure that everything is tidied up. The last piece is communicating. And the specific communication we're talking about at the end of the success roadmap is communicating to the seller and potentially the buyers, depending on where you're at in this process and where you're at in the organization, what your decision is, and then communicating with them how to best manifest that decision. And those are some really important things. So let's take a little bit of time on it. First off, deciding how, when, and to whom you're going to break the news is important. But also it's critical to remember that an M&A process is a very volatile situation. There are a million things that could make an M&A transaction fall apart. And there are a handful of things that can help it close. And so once you've made the decision, I want to be a part of this, or I do not want to be a part of this, you're making a very impactful decision. So understanding the implications of that decision and treating that decision with care is going to be critical. If you decide that you do not want to stay through the transition, talk with the seller or be transparent. This is a person who's been your boss for a while, presumably. And so figure out a plan of how you can extricate yourself from the business in a reasonable fashion that doesn't derail the transaction. Because, killing a transaction because you decide you don't want to be a part of it is really not a healthy response to any of this. Supporting the transaction, even though you choose not to be a part of its future, is a higher order decision. It's the more respectful decision, and it's going to help you not burn bridges as you move to the next stage of your career. Now, when you decide that you want to be a part of this, communicating with the seller first, your boss first, is still going to be the most important thing. But there's a chance that you could say, not only do I want to be a part, but I have some vision for how I can bring my best self to the new company. Would it be okay to talk with the purchaser about this vision? And if it's a productive, proactive vision, most sellers are going to say, yeah, that actually strengthens the success of the transaction. Please, let's set up this meeting. Let's go, do it together. And again, that's giving you control. That's giving you credibility, making you indispensable, and helping to give you the best possible chance of achieving your ideal future with this new partner.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully, beautifully said. I think that this is an overlooked roadmap for dealing with team M&A anxiety. And I'm so glad that we've covered this territory in this episode. I think it's probably time to move on to our takeaways before wrapping this up.
I think that's great. I love it. And, thank you so much. This has been fun. I've learned some things as we've discussed it.
Likewise.
And, for me, the biggest key takeaway that I want people to leave this episode with is very simply that as an individual, as a cog in the bigger machine that is being sold, it's so easy to become helpless and to feel powerless and to feel like a victim of a change. But for me, it's really important to point out that you have so much more control than you would assume in this scenario. And you can assume that and exert it in a way that's going to be exponentially positive, not just for your own future, but for your team members and for the future of the business. No matter what you choose is your best path forward.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And then the other takeaway that we think is important from this episode is again to view the M&A process as your own growth opportunity, as a kick in the pants benefit, instead of as an invitation into a downward spiral of anxiety that's inevitably going to lead either to you being paralyzed or you being impulsive in your decisions. This is an AFGO instead. If you don't know that that acronym, I'll do the version of it for polite company. AFGO stands for another friggin growth opportunity.
I love it.
So, on behalf of the wonderful, ever enthusiastic and articulate Jason Tuzinkewich and myself, we thank you once again for listening to this episode. And we, as always, invite you to click the subscribe button so you can be notified immediately when we release future episodes. We also particularly look forward to reading your thoughts, questions, topic suggestions, and other requests in the comments section at the bottom of each episode's page, because it's through your feedback that we know what's important for us to cover in future episodes. And all of the episode pages for this Boosting Business Value podcast are available through the Blue Sky Advisors website. And the direct link to the podcast page is blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. Lastly, we invite you to take advantage when you're on Blue Sky's website of our free surveys for helping you gauge your business's health more accurately and its opportunities more effectively. And each of those great surveys includes real-time feedback and recommendations. So go ahead and visit blueskyadvisors.net today to get started.
That's all for this episode of Boosting Business Value. May your new learning result in the smoothest and most profitable exit strategy for your business. With the right knowledge and guidance, the sky's the limit to what you can do. Do not miss an episode by subscribing to the show. And if you want to learn where your business currently stands, we also have free key opportunity assessments. Find all of them at blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next one.